The grizzly bear's roar echoed through the rocky Montana canyon, overlapping with the terrified neighing of Maxwell Cooper's horse. The animal reared violently, slamming the cowboy into the rocky ground before shooting off at a run. Maxwell barely had time to roll to the side when the predator's sharp claws tore through the air where his head had been seconds before. The former Union soldier was no stranger to danger. 6 years on the front lines of the Civil War had taught him that death could come in many forms, but he had never imagined that his end would come by the claws of a bear in the wilds of Montana. His hand found the Colt revolver in his holster, but the bear was too fast. A sharp blow from its gigantic paw knocked the gun out of his hand, sending it flying away. The next impact came like a hammer against his chest, the claws tearing through leather and flesh. Maxwell felt the metallic taste of blood in his mouth as he struggled to stay conscious. Through the haze of pain that began to cloud his vision, he saw a silhouette emerge from between the trees. A sharp, melodic sound cut through the air, followed by the whistle of an arrow. The bear roared again, this time in pain, retreating a few steps. More arrows whizzed through the air, and the figure now Maxwell could see, it was a woman moved with the grace of a cougar, positioning herself between him and the wounded animal. Her voice rose in a soft but firm chant words, in a language he didn't understand, but which seemed to calm the beast. Slowly, the bear retreated, disappearing into the trees. The last thing Maxwell saw before losing consciousness was the face of his savior, eyes as black and deep as the starless night, framed by long black braids adorned with feathers. When he woke up, he was inside a Lakota tribal tent. The smell of medicinal herbs mingled with the scent of cedar smoke. His chest throbbed under soft leather bandages, but the pain was surprisingly under control. "The bear spirit has tested your strength today," said a melodious voice. It was his savior, now sitting next to the makeshift bed where he lay. "I'm Luna Starry Sky." Maxwell tried to sit up, but a twinge of pain made him reconsider. "Maxwell Cooper," she replied in a hoarse voice. "I owe you my life." Luna smiled, but there was a shadow in her eyes that Maxwell couldn't decipher. "The Great Spirit guided my steps to you," she said, as she prepared more medicine. But maybe it wasn't just a coincidence. In the days that followed, Maxwell discovered that he was in the Lakota village near Fort Blessing, a trading post where he intended to get work as a foreman. Luna tended to his wounds with a mixture of ancestral knowledge and kindness that intrigued him more and more. It was during a particularly hot afternoon, when Luna was changing his bandages, that the first clue emerged. Her delicate fingers traced an old scar on his shoulder where a Confederate bullet had hit him. "You fought in the war," she said. It wasn't a question. "Union, 7th Cavalry Regiment." Maxwell replied, noticing how she tensed at his words. "Under whose command?" "Colonel James Cooper," he said, realizing too late what that name meant to her. "My father." Luna turned away as if she had been burned, her eyes now filled with an old, familiar pain. "So you are his son." Her voice shook slightly. "Of the man who led the Wolf Creek massacre." The air inside the tent grew heavy with the weight of that revelation. Maxwell knew that story, one of the many conflicts his father had led against native tribes. But for Luna, it wasn't just history. "My family was there," she continued, her words laden with a deep sadness. "I was 12 years old. I managed to escape because my grandmother hid me in a sacred cave. When I came back, there was no one to bury." Maxwell felt as if the bear's claws were tearing at his chest again. But this time, the pain was different. It was the agony of guilt, the weight of a blood-stained legacy that wasn't his own, but from which he couldn't escape. "Luna, No," she interrupted him, standing up. Don't say anything. I'm going to continue treating your wounds because it's my duty as a healer. But when you're healed, you must leave." She left the tent, leaving Maxwell alone, with the weight of a story he didn't fully know, but which now threatened to destroy something that had only just begun to be born in his heart. That night, lying on his recovery bed, Maxwell faced the shadows of his own past. The stories his father had proudly told about civilizing the West now had a new meaning tainted by the blood of innocence. And Luna, who had saved him without, knowing who he was, bore the scars of that violence on her soul. The night wind blew through the gaps in the tent, bringing with it the distant sound of drums and chants. Maxwell knew he had a choice to make. He could leave as soon as he recovered, leaving this painful story behind, or he could stay and try somehow to heal wounds much deeper than those left by the bear. As the sound of the drums echoed through the night, Maxwell Cooper realized that his fate was hopelessly intertwined with that of Luna's starry sky, in a complex dance of redemption, forgiveness, and perhaps, if the spirits allowed it, love. The days dragged by in the Lakota village like heavy clouds before a storm. Maxwell watched Luna work her movements graceful as she prepared poultices and ointments, always keeping a calculated distance from him. The silence between them was as thick as the morning mist that covered the mountains of Montana. During the dressing changes, her fingers were skillful and gentle, but her eyes avoided meeting his. Maxwell felt every touch as sweet torture, the physical closeness contrasting with the emotional chasm that separated them. The scars on his chest began to heal, but the invisible wounds between them only deepened. One afternoon, while Luna was applying a herbal paste to his wounds, Maxwell mustered the courage to break through that wall of silence. "My father died 2 years ago," he said, his voice as low as a confession. "I never approved of his actions, but I never had the strength to confront him directly either." Luna paused her work for a moment, her hands trembling slightly. "Words don't undo the past, Maxwell Cooper." "No," he agreed, "but perhaps they can build a different future." Before Luna could reply, cries of alarm echoed through the camp. Swift Horse, one of the tribe's most respected warriors, rushed into the tent. "White men," he announced in his own language, which Luna translated for Maxwell. "A large group is approaching from the valley." Maxwell tried to get up, but Luna firmly stopped him. "You're not strong enough yet," she warned. "I know this kind of situation," he insisted. "I can help." Luna hesitated, torn between her natural distrust and the urgency of the moment. Finally, she helped him to his feet, offering her support as they walked out of the tent. The camp was abuzz. Warriors mounted their horses while women hurriedly put away important belongings. Maxwell recognized the signs. It wasn't the first time he had seen an indigenous community preparing for a possible confrontation. Their men from the Black River Mining Company informed Fast Horse after riders returned with more information. "They say they've found gold in the sacred mountains." Maxwell felt Luna's body stiffen beside him. "The sacred caves," she murmured. "Where my grandmother hid me." "How many men?" asked Maxwell, his military instinct taking over. 20, maybe more," replied Swift Horse, studying the ex-soldier with curiosity. Maxwell knew the Black River Company well, an organization notorious for its aggressive expansion tactics. His father had done business with them in the past, something that had always bothered him. "They won't just come to negotiate," said Maxwell. "We need a plan." Luna stared at him intensely. "Why do you want to help us?" "Because it's time to choose which side of history I want to be on." Over the next few hours, Maxwell worked with the Lakota warriors, sharing his knowledge of military tactics and the way the approaching men thought. Despite the pain in his chest, He remained focused, determined to prove his worth not only to the tribe, but especially to Luna. The plan was simple but effective. Instead of direct confrontation, they would use the Lakota wisdom about the territory and the unconventional warfare techniques that Maxwell had learned during his years in the army. The idea was to make the invaders believe that the area was much more dangerous and less valuable than they had imagined. During the preparations, Maxwell noticed subtle changes in Luna's behavior. Although she still maintained her reserve, there were moments when their gazes met and remained connected for longer than necessary. On one of these occasions, she approached him. "My grandmother used to say that spirits sometimes choose strange paths to teach us their lessons," she said, adjusting the bandages on his chest. "Maybe the bear didn't try to kill you that day. Maybe it was guiding you here." Maxwell covered her hand with his, feeling the warmth of her skin. "Luna, I know I bear the name of a man who caused your family untold pain. But I'm not my father. And if you give me the chance, I want to prove it." Before Luna could reply, a warning signal sounded. The Black River men were approaching. The moment of truth had arrived. Night fell over the valley like a protective cloak, bringing with it the promise of confrontation. Maxwell watched the Dadi Lakota warriors move, each taking up their position as planned. His chest ached with the effort, but the determination in his eyes was stronger than any physical pain. Luna remained by his side, her presence both a comfort and a constant reminder of what was at stake. It wasn't just a dispute over territory. It was a battle for the preservation of a culture, the protection of sacred places, and perhaps the chance of redemption. "Whatever happens tonight," said Maxwell, his voice low but firm, "I want you to know that I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." Luna stared at him longingly, and for the first time since the revelation about her father, Maxwell saw a different gleam in her eyes, something that looked hopeful. "Spirits work in mysterious ways, Maxwell Cooper," she replied softly. "Maybe it's time we found out together what story they want us to write." The first stars began to dot the Montana sky, while below in the shadows of the valley, two hearts wounded by the past prepared to face an uncertain future, united by a common purpose and the faint promise of something deeper that was beginning to blossom between them. Night crept over the Lakota territory like a dark cloak as the Black River men approached the valley. Maxwell, leaning against an ancient tree, watched as the invaders' torches snaked down the trail, looking like a snake of fire crawling towards the village. Luna stood beside him, her hands busy preparing small bundles of herbs, which, when burned, would produce a thick, disorienting smoke. The plan they had devised depended as much on cunning as on the traditional knowledge of their people. "The spirits of the sacred caves don't like intruders," whispered Luna, tying up the last bundle. "My grandmother used to say that they protect those who respect them and confuse those who desecrate their dwelling." Maxwell nodded, feeling a twinge in his chest as he moved. His wounds had not yet completely healed, but the urgency of the situation allowed him no respite. "How many warriors do we have in place?" 15, replied Swift Horse, emerging silently from the shadows. "The others are protecting the women and children who have taken refuge further north." The plan was simple in theory, but required precise execution. The Lakota warriors, who knew the terrain intimately, had prepared a series of natural traps. They were not intended to kill, but to confuse and frighten the invaders. "Here they come," muttered Maxwell, watching the group of miners approach the first strategic point. Luna began to sing softly an ancient melody that seemed to dance with the night wind. At her signal, the first bundles of herbs were thrown, releasing a thick smoke that mixed with the natural mist of the valley. The Black River men stopped, their voices rising in confusion. The smoke carried by the wind snaked between them like dancing ghosts. From the top of the rocks, Lakota warriors began to beat their drums, the sound reverberating through the canyon walls in a way that seemed to come from all directions. "What the hell is that?" shouted one of the miners, his voice betraying nervousness. Maxwell recognized the man leading the group, Richard Hawkins, a well-known land dealer with a reputation for using questionable methods to get what he wanted. He had done business with her father in the past, and the memory left a bitter taste in his mouth. Luna touched his arm gently. "It's time," she said, her eyes shining in the darkness. Maxwell followed her through the shadows, moving silently despite the pain. They positioned themselves behind a rock formation that amplified sounds, a crucial part of their plan. The smoke now completely enveloped the group of miners, and the drums continued their hypnotic rhythm. Luna began another chant, this time louder, her voice blending in with the sounds of the night in a way that made even Maxwell shiver. "It's the spirits," one of the men shouted in panic. "This place is cursed." Hawkins tried to keep control of the group, but fear was spreading fast. The horses, nervous of the smoke and sounds, began to stall and neigh. It was then that Maxwell saw something that made his heart leap. The men, frightened, drew his gun and started firing blindly into the darkness. "Luna, look out." He pulled her behind the rock just in time to avoid a stray bullet. For a moment they were close, very close, their bodies pressed against each other behind the protection of the rock. Maxwell could feel her heart beating fast, her rapid breathing mingling with his. "You didn't have to do that," she said, but her words lacked their usual harshness. "I know how to protect myself." "I know," he replied softly, "but I can't help wanting to keep you safe." The moment was interrupted by more gunfire and panicked shouts. The confusion among the miners was coming to a head exactly as planned. Hawkins shouted orders, trying to reorganize his men, but it was too late. Panic spread like fire through dry straw. Horses reared, men fell, and the darkness seemed to take on a life of its own with the shadows cast by the smoke and fire of the fallen torches. "Fall back. Fall back." Hawkins's voice finally gave in to fear. "This place is cursed." Maxwell and Luna watched as the Black River men beat a disorganized retreat, leaving behind equipment and a few weapons. The plan had worked better than they expected. As the last sounds of the invaders faded into the night, a different kind of silence fell over the valley. Luna was still close to Maxwell, and he could feel a subtle change in the energy between them. "You fought by our side tonight," she said, her voice carrying a tone he had never heard before. "You risked your life for our sake." "Because of you," he corrected softly, "and I'd do it again." Luna studied him for a long moment, the light of the rising moon illuminating her face. "The wounds of the past run deep, Maxwell. Cooper. But maybe the spirits are right in their mysterious ways." Before he could reply, shouts of victory began to echo through the village. The warriors emerged from the shadows, celebrating their success. Swift Horse approached them, a rare smile on his normally serious face. "The spirits were with us tonight," he declared, bowing his head in respect to Maxwell. "And they were with you, too, white man." As the celebration began around them, Maxwell felt Luna entwine her fingers in his, a gesture as subtle as it was meaningful. The stars shone above silent witnesses to a night that had changed something fundamental between them. The battle was won, but Maxwell knew that the war, both against those who coveted the Lakota lands and against the ghosts of the past, was far from over. Still, with Luna's hand in his, and the tribe's newly won respect for the first time since he had arrived there, he felt real hope in his heart. The victory over the Black River men had brought a new dynamic to the Lakota village. Maxwell, still recovering from his injuries, noticed the subtle changes in the way the tribesmen treated him. The looks of distrust had been replaced by respectful nods, and even the most skeptical warriors were beginning to accept his presence. But it was the transformation in his relationship with Luna that affected him most. The mornings after the battle during the treatment sessions, the silence between them took on a different quality, less tense, more charged with unspoken possibilities. Her hands still trembled slightly when she touched his scars, but now for reasons they both preferred not to name. "Your wounds are healing well," said Luna, one particularly clear morning as she applied a new ointment to his chest. "The Tuhi bear spirit tested your strength, but you proved to be stronger." Maxwell covered her hand with his, stopping her movements. "Some scars take longer to heal," he replied, his eyes meeting hers with intensity. "Especially the ones we can't see?" Luna didn't withdraw her hand, allowing that moment of connection. "My grandmother used to say that scars are maps of our journey," she replied softly. "They show us where we've been, but they don't determine where we're going." The moment was interrupted by Swift Horse, who rushed into the tent. "Riders are approaching," he announced, his expression grave. "But they're not from Black River." Maxwell stood up, ignoring the twinge of pain. "How many?" "3 men. One of them carries a sheriff's star." Luna and Maxwell exchanged worried glances. The presence of the law didn't always mean justice for the Lakota, and after the confrontation with the miners, the situation was delicate. "I'll talk to them," said Maxwell, reaching for his shirt. "Not alone," Luna declared firmly, her voice leaving no room for argument. "We're stronger together. That's what we've learned." Side by side, they walked to the entrance of the village, where the 3 horsemen were already waiting. Maxwell immediately recognized Sheriff William Harrison of Fort Blessing, a man known for his impartiality, something rare in those territories. "Maxwell Cooper," said Harrison, getting off his horse. "I thought I'd find you here. Richard Hawkins has filed a rather interesting complaint about wild spirits and Indian witchcraft." Despite the seriousness of the situation, Maxwell couldn't help but smile slightly. "I imagine so, Sheriff, but maybe he forgot to mention that he was invading Lakota territory with less than friendly intentions." Harrison studied the group for a moment, his eyes lingering on the proximity between Maxwell and Luna. "I've got a problem on my hands, Cooper. Black River Mining has influence, and they're demanding official action. The caves are sacred to my people." Luna intervened, her voice firm but controlled. "They cannot be sold or traded. They are home to the spirits of our ancestors." The sheriff removed his hat, a gesture of respect that surprised everyone. "Miss, I know the laws of men, and how they often fail to protect what is truly sacred. But I need something more concrete than spirits to keep Black River at bay." It was then that Maxwell had an idea. "What if we could prove that the Io caves have historical value, that they're a traditional burial site?" Luna looked at him with surprise, and then understanding. "My grandmother's records. She documented all the ceremonies, all the rituals, in English, so that we would never forget our history." "That could work," said Harrison, putting his hat back on. "With proper documentation, I could apply for federal protection for the site as a historic site. It wouldn't be perfect, but it would give us time to find a more permanent solution." The discussion continued for some time, settling on details and possibilities. When the riders left, taking with them the promise to return in 3 days to examine the documents, a new sense of hope hung in the air. "You continue to amaze me, Maxwell Cooper," said Luna as they walked back to the village. "Using white men's laws to protect our way of life. I've learned that sometimes you have to build bridges between different worlds, he replied, stopping to look at her. "Like you did when you saved me that day, even though you didn't know who I was." Luna gently touched the scar on his cheek, a gesture so intimate that it made Maxwell's heart race. "Maybe I've always known who you are, Maxwell. Not your father's son, but the man who chose his own path." That night, as the crescent moon shed its silvery light over the camp, Maxwell found Luna sitting by the sacred fire, her grandmother's papers scattered on her lap. Wordlessly, he sat down beside her, offering his presence as silent support, while she immersed herself in the memories of her people. "Every word here is a bridge to our past," she said, her fingers delicately tracing the yellowed pages. "My grandmother knew that one day we would need to prove our right to exist in a white man's world." Maxwell covered her hand with his, a gesture that was becoming natural between them. "Your people survived because they never forgot who they were. And maybe I found who I really am here with you." Luna raised her eyes to him, and in the glow of the fire Maxwell saw all the possibilities of a future he had never imagined for himself. A future where the scars of the past didn't define the present, where bridges could be built between different worlds, and where love could flourish in the most unlikely places. "Spirits have their own plans," Luna whispered, leaning slightly towards him. "And sometimes, Maxwell Cooper, they are wiser than all of us." The fire crackled softly, casting dancing shadows over their faces, while the Montana night wrapped them in its silent embrace, promising that some stories even born of tragedy could find their way to redemption through love. The 3 days that followed Sheriff Harrison's visit brought a new energy to the Lakota village. Luna spent hours poring over her grandmother's papers, translating old stories and rituals, while Maxwell helped organize the information in a way that the authorities could understand. Working together brought them closer and closer, their hands occasionally touching over the yellowed pages, their gazes meeting with increasing frequency. One particularly hot afternoon while they were working in Luna's tent, Maxwell noticed something different about the writings. "These markings," he pointed out, leaning over an old map. "They seem to indicate more than just the sacred caves." Luna moved closer, her hair brushing lightly against his shoulder. "They're the spirit paths," she explained, her fingers tracing the lines on the paper. "My grandmother mapped out the entire sacred region. See how the lines connect. It's like a sacred web that protects our land." "And that could help us with Harrison," Maxwell realized, feeling excited. "It's not just the caves, it's a whole interconnected system of sacred sites. It strengthens our case even more." Luna's smile lit up her face in a way that made Maxwell's heart skip a beat. "You really understand, don't you? They're not just markings on a piece of paper to you." "How could it be?" he replied softly. "I've learned to see through your eyes, Luna, and what I see is too precious to lose." The moment was interrupted by the sound of approaching hooves. Swift Horse appeared at the entrance to the tent, his expression tense. "Black River riders have been spotted near the west stream. They're armed." Maxwell stood up quickly, ignoring the twinge in his partially healed chest. "How many?" "5 men. They seem to be mapping the area." Luna began hastily gathering up the documents. "They can't find us with these. It's the only evidence we have." "We need to hide them," agreed Maxwell. "And then deal with these men before they cause trouble." "The caves," suggested Luna, already packing up the papers carefully. "There's a safe place where my grandmother kept her most important belongings. No one but me knows its location." The decision was made quickly. While Swift Horse organized a group of warriors to monitor the invaders, Maxwell and Luna set off towards the sacred caves. The sun was beginning its descent over the horizon, painting the Montana sky in shades of purple and gold. The path was steep and treacherous, but Luna guided them safely, her steps sure, even in the most difficult passages. Maxwell watched as she moved in perfect harmony with the terrain, as if the earth itself recognized her as its daughter. "It was here," she said suddenly, stopping next to a rock formation. "In this cave that my grandmother hid me that day. I could hear the gunshots, the screams, but she made me promise not to come out until everything was quiet." Maxwell felt the weight of that memory as if it were his own pain. Gently, he touched Luna's shoulder. "You survived to keep the memory of your people alive, and now you're going to help protect their future." Luna turned to him, her eyes shining with restrained tears. "For so long, I've carried so much hatred. For your father, for everyone who was like him. But you're different. It's as if the spirits have sent you to heal not only your own wounds, but mine too." "Luna," Maxwell began, but was interrupted by the distant sound of voices. The Black River men were approaching. Quickly Luna led them into the cave through narrow passages to a hidden chamber. There, among ancient cave paintings and ceremonial offerings, she hid the documents. "We need to go back," Maxwell whispered, but Luna grabbed his arm. "Wait," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "There's something I need to say. Something I've been holding back since that night of the battle." In the darkness of the sacred cave, Maxwell could just make out the outline of her face, but he felt the intensity of her presence as if it were a living flame. "My grandmother always said that true love is like a river," Luna continued. "It may find obstacles in its path, but it always finds a way to keep going. Maxwell Cooper, you came into my life as a wound from the past, but you've become a promise for the future." Maxwell felt his heart racing. With infinite gentleness, he touched Luna's face, his fingers tracing the curve of her cheek. "From the moment you saved me, something in me changed, as if my whole life before was just a preparation for meeting you." The sound of voices and footsteps echoed closer, but at that moment, protected by the sacred darkness of the cave, the outside world seemed distant. Luna leaned towards Maxwell, her lips meeting his in a soft kiss full of unspoken promises. The moment was brief but profound, charged with the weight of their intertwined histories and the hope of a shared future. When they parted, they both knew that something fundamental had changed between them. "Now," said Luna, her voice firmer, "let's protect our future." Silently they emerged from the cave through a side passage, avoiding the Black River men who were still searching the area. The sun had almost disappeared over the horizon, turning the mountains into dark silhouettes against the burning sky. As they made their way back to the village, Maxwell realized that it wasn't just his mission to protect the Lakota lands that had solidified that afternoon. It was also his certainty that his fate was irrevocably linked to that of Luna Starry Sky, for whatever the future held for them. The evening wind carried the scent of sage and promise, as the first stars began to dot the Montana sky, silent witnesses to a love that defied history, culture, and prejudice, blooming like a rare flower in the harsh soil of the Old West. The news of the presence of the Black River men near the sacred caves spread through the village like fire on dry prairie. Maxwell and Luna returned at dusk to find the community in a state of alert, with warriors positioned strategically around the perimeter. The kiss shared in the cave still echoed between them like a silent promise, but the circumstances didn't allow for moments of reflection. Swift Horse awaited them with worrying news. "The men weren't just mapping," the warrior reported, his voice deep. "They were carrying explosives. They intend to open the way by force, if necessary. Maxwell felt Luna stiffen beside him. The idea of dynamite in the sacred caves was more than a physical threat. It was a desecration of everything her people held sacred. "Sheriff Harrison returns tomorrow," Maxwell said, his mind working quickly. "But we need to make sure the caves remain intact until then." "Hawkins won't wait," Luna argued, her dark eyes reflecting concern. "He knows we're gathering documentation. He'll try to act before we can legally stop him." The night advanced, and with it, the tension in the camp grew. Maxwell watched Luna move among her people, her presence bringing calm and determination to everyone she met. His heart filled with admiration. She was a true leader, even if she bore no official title. It was during a tribal council meeting that a young warrior arrived breathless with new information. "More men have arrived," he announced. "They're setting up camp near the stream with wagons full of equipment." "How many now?" asked Maxwell. "At least 15, and I saw Hawkins among them." Luna and Maxwell exchanged worried glances. The situation was escalating faster than they had anticipated. "We can't wait for the sheriff," decided Luna, standing up. "We need to act tonight." Maxwell knew that tone in her voice. It was the same one she had used the night they had faced the first invaders. "What do you have in mind?" "The caves have passages that only my people know about," she explained. "If we can remove the explosives while they sleep." "It's too risky," interrupted Maxwell, touching her arm gently. "Hawkins is no fool. He'll have guards." "Then we'll give them something to guard," suggested Swifthorse, a cunning glint in his eye. "Like we did before, shadows and sounds to distract their feeble minds." The plan quickly began to take shape. While most of the warriors would create a distraction on the opposite side of the camp from the invaders, a small group led by Maxwell and Luna would infiltrate to sabotage the explosives. "You don't have to do that," Luna told Maxwell as they prepared. "Your wounds haven't healed completely yet." Maxwell took her hand, entwining his fingers in hers. "My place is by your side, Luna, in every way." The moment of intimacy was interrupted by the distant sound of an explosion. Everyone ran out of the tents, only to see an orange flash light up the horizon in the direction of the caves. "No!" shouted Luna, her whole body shaking. "They started earlier." There was no more time for elaborate plans. Maxwell quickly mounted his horse, pulling Luna to sit behind him. Other warriors followed, galloping through the night as more explosions echoed through the valley. The wind whipped their faces as they rode, and Maxwell could feel Luna's arms tighten around his waist, her body tense against his back. She murmured prayers in Lakota, her voice almost lost in the roar of the wind. When they reached the caves, the scene was chaotic. Black River men were moving around with torches positioning more dynamite charges. Hawkins was in the center shouting orders. "Stop!" Luna's shout cut through the night like a knife. "You're desecrating sacred ground." Hawkins turned around, his face illuminated by the fire of the torches. "Well, well, if it isn't the Indian princess and her white knight." Maxwell dismounted, positioning himself protectively in front of Luna. "It's over, Hawkins. Sheriff Harrison is on his way with documents protecting these lands." "And you think I care about papers?" Hawkins laughed bitterly. "Until the law comes, there won't be any more caves to protect." It was then that Maxwell noticed something that made his blood run cold. Strings of dynamite, already lit, snaking towards the cave's main entrance. "Luna, the explosives!" he shouted, running towards the lit cords. Chaos ensued. Lakota warriors emerged from the shadows, engaging Hawkins' men in combat. Luna rushed to Maxwell's aid, as he desperately tried to extinguish the burning cords. "There's no time," she shouted, pulling him along. "The secret passage. We can save the documents." Together, they ran to a hidden side entrance, while behind them the battle continued. The interior of the cave was pitch black, but Luna guided him safely through the tunnels. The first explosion shook the earth beneath their feet, causing stones to come loose from the ceiling. Maxwell pulled Luna against him, protecting her from the falling debris. "This way." She led him into a deeper chamber where the precious documents were hidden. More explosions reverberated through the cave, and the sound of crumbling rocks grew closer and closer. Maxwell grabbed the documents while Luna collected some sacred artifacts. "Luna, we have to leave now." The way back was a nightmare of dust and falling rocks. Maxwell could feel his chest throbbing, the bear's wounds protesting against the easy effort, but he stood firm, holding Luna's hand as they ran through the increasingly unstable passage. When they finally emerged into the night, the main entrance to the cave had completely collapsed. The air was heavy with dust and smoke, and screams echoed throughout the valley. Luna fell to her knees, tears cutting trails through the dust on her face. The caves, the spirits. Maxwell hugged her tightly, feeling her body shake with sobs. "We managed to save the documents," he whispered in her ear. "And as long as your people live, the spirits will have a home." The sound of more riders approaching made everyone turn around, only to see Sheriff Harrison arriving with his deputies earlier than expected. "Looks like we're just in time to witness a crime," Harrison declared, his hard eyes fixed on Hawkins. "Destruction of protected property, attempted murder. The list only gets longer, Richard." As the deputies began to arrest the Black River men, Maxwell continued to hug Luna, offering silent strength as she watched the destruction of part of her sacred heritage. "We'll rebuild," he promised softly. "Somehow we'll find a way." Luna raised her face to him, her eyes shining with a mixture of pain and determination. "Together, together," Maxwell confirmed, sealing the promise with a soft kiss as the sky began to lighten with the first lights of dawn. Promising a new day, and with it the chance of a new beginning. The sun was rising over Montana, revealing the devastation of the night before. The main entrance to the sacred caves was unrecognizable, a pile of rocks and rubble, where millennia-old stories once stood. Luna stood motionless in front of the destruction, her fingers tightly clutching the saved documents, while Maxwell organized with Sheriff Harrison the arrest of the Black River men. "They'll pay for this, miss," Harrison assured her, approaching Luna. "I have enough witnesses to keep them locked up for a long time, and with these documents, we can secure federal protection for what's left of the site." Luna nodded silently, her eyes still fixed on the ruins. Maxwell knew that look. It was the same one he had seen on soldiers who had lost something too precious to be named. "There are other entrances," she finally said, her voice low but firm. "Ancient passages that the spirits have kept hidden. Perhaps all is not lost." As Harrison led Hawkins and his men to Fort Blessing, the tribe began to mobilize. Warriors and elders carefully examined the area, mapping the damage and looking for artifacts that could be recovered. Maxwell watched Luna coordinate the efforts, with a quiet strength that impressed him more and more. She had wept at the destruction, but now her face showed the determination of someone who refused to be defeated. "We need to document everything," she explained to Maxwell as they walked around the perimeter. "Every fallen stone, every mark on the walls that we can still reach. It's the evidence Harrison needs, but it's also our history." "What about the other entrances?" he asked, noticing how she occasionally stopped to touch certain rock formations, as if she were reading an invisible language in the stone. Some were affected by the explosions, but there's one in particular. Luna hesitated, looking around to make sure they were alone. It's the most sacred of all. My grandmother used to say that not all secrets should be revealed, even to protect them. Maxwell understood what she wasn't saying. There was knowledge that belonged only to the Lakota people's secrets that needed to remain guarded. The day progressed as the community worked tirelessly. Maxwell noticed that despite the tragedy, there was something different in the air, a stronger bond between the people, including himself. He was no longer seen as an outsider, but as someone who had proved his worth in protecting what was sacred. It was in the middle of the afternoon that Swift Horse brought important news. "We found something," he announced, guiding Maxwell and Luna to a partially collapsed area. The explosions revealed something that was hidden. Through a crack in the rock, it was possible to see ancient cave paintings preserved for centuries in the darkness. Luna gasped as she recognized the symbols. "They're the prophecies," she whispered, her eyes watering. "My grandmother used to talk about them, but no one knew exactly where they were. The explosions, they didn't destroy everything. They only revealed what was hidden." Maxwell gazed reverently at the ancient drawings. Figures danced on the stone walls, telling stories of unity between different peoples, of transformation and renewal. "Look," Luna pointed to a specific sequence of symbols. "It speaks of a time of great change, when the people of the rising sun and the people of the setting sun would learn to walk together. My grandmother used to say that prophecies are not just about the future, but about the choices we make in the present." Maxwell felt the weight of those words. He and Luna were the embodiment of that prophecy, a white man and a Lakota woman, united by something greater than their differences. "Perhaps," he said softly, "yesterday's destruction is not an end but a beginning. Like a forest after a fire, sometimes it takes something to be destroyed for something new to be born." Luna turned to him, her eyes shining with a new light. "That's exactly what my grandmother would say. Spirits have mysterious ways of showing us the way." At that moment, alone in the dimness of the ancient cave, Maxwell sensed that something profound was changing between them. It wasn't just love that was growing, but a deeper understanding of their roles in a story, bigger than themselves. "Luna," he began, taking her hands in his, "when you brought me to your village after the bear attack, I thought you were just saving my life. But you saved much more than that. You saved my soul. You showed me a different way of seeing the world, of understanding what is truly sacred." Silent tears streamed down Luna's face as she listened. "And you, Maxwell Cooper, helped me to see that not every white man carries the heart of stone of his ancestors, that it is possible to build bridges where before there were only walls. I want to build more than bridges," he said, his voice low but intense. "I want to build a life, here with you, with your people, if they accept me." The silence that followed was filled only by the distant sound of voices working outside and the occasional crash of small stones in the depths of the cave. Luna studied his face for a long moment, as if searching for something in his eyes. "The path won't be easy," she finally replied. "There will be those who don't understand on both sides. Since when does true love take the easy way out?" Maxwell smiled softly, touching her cheek. Luna returned the smile, leaning in to kiss him. The kiss tasted of promises and possibilities of futures, as yet unwritten but full of hope. When they parted, the afternoon sun came through the crack in the rock, illuminating the ancient paintings with a golden glow. It was as if the spirits themselves were blessing that moment. "Come on," said Luna, entwining her fingers in his. "There's a lot of work to be done, and now we'll do it together." They emerged from the cave to find the community still at work, preserving what could be saved, documenting what had been lost, and most importantly, keeping alive the hope of a future where different cultures could coexist in peace. The sun began its descent over the Montana horizon, promising a new dawn full of possibilities for Maxwell Cooper and Luna's starry sky, two hearts united by fate tragedy, and ultimately by the love that transcends all barriers. The dawn brought with it a new energy for the Lakota village. With the arrest of Hawkins and his men, and the discovery of the ancient prophecies in the caves, a renewed sense of purpose hung in the air. Maxwell watched Luna coordinate the efforts to preserve the recovered artifacts, his heart overflowing with admiration for the strength and grace with which she faced each challenge. "The elders want to hold a ceremony," Luna announced, approaching him with a special twinkle in her eyes, "to thank the spirits for preserving the prophecies and to ask for their blessing on our union." Maxwell felt his heart race. A traditional Lakota ceremony. "Yes," she replied, a slight blush coloring her cheeks. "If you accept, it would be a way of making official your acceptance into the tribe and our commitment to each other." Before Maxwell could reply, Swift Horse approached with a grave expression. "Riders are approaching Fort Blessing," he announced. "Many riders." Maxwell and Luna exchanged worried glances. Even with Hawkins trapped, the threat from Black River mining wasn't completely over. "How many?" asked Maxwell, his military instinct taking over. "At least 30 men," replied Swift Horse. "But they don't seem to be from the mining company. They're carrying an army flag." Maxwell's blood ran cold. He knew this tactic well. The army was often called in to settle disputes with native tribes, usually in the interests of the white settlers. "We need to find Harrison," Maxwell decided. "He has the documents that prove our rights to the land." Luna touched his arm gently. "I'll go with you." The ride to Fort Blessing was tense with the strong Montana sun beating down on their faces. Maxwell couldn't help but notice how Luna rode with the same natural grace as she did everything else, her long black hair dancing in the wind. They found Sheriff Harrison in his office, already aware of the approaching troops. "These are Colonel Richardson's men," he informed them, showing them a telegram. "Apparently Black River Mining has powerful friends in Washington." "But we have the documents," argued Luna. "The evidence of the historical and sacred importance of the caves." Harrison sighed heavily. "Yes, we do. But you know how politics works in these territories. We need something more convincing." It was then that Maxwell had an idea. What if we could prove that Black River was acting illegally even before the explosions, that they knew about the historical importance of the site and still went ahead with the destruction? "How?" asked Luna, her eyes shining with renewed hope. "Hawkins," replied Maxwell. "He's in jail, desperate and afraid. Maybe he's willing to make a deal to reduce his sentence." The plan quickly began to take shape. While Harrison prepared the necessary documents, Maxwell and Luna went to the cells to talk to Hawkins. The man they found was very different from the arrogant leader of the night before. Sitting in his cell, he looked smaller and older. "Come to gloat, Cooper?" he asked bitterly. "I came to offer you a chance," replied Maxwell. "The army is coming, Hawkins, and when they do, the full weight of the law is going to fall on someone. The question is on whom?" Luna stepped forward, her presence commanding respect, even in the face of the man who had tried to destroy her sacred estate. "We know that Black River had prior knowledge of the historical importance of the caves. We just want the truth. After hours of tense negotiation, Hawkins finally broke down. He confessed that the company had found out about the historical value of the caves months before, but decided to go ahead with mining anyway. More importantly, he provided documents proving the conspiracy. When Colonel Richardson arrived at Fort Blessing that afternoon, he found more than just a local land dispute. He found evidence of corporate corruption violation of protected historical sites and a united community, both native and white, fighting to preserve something precious. "Impressive," commented the colonel, examining the documents, "especially this bit about the ancient prophecies. I imagine the Smithsonian will be very interested in studying and preserving this site." Luna squeezed Maxwell's hand, and he could feel her tremble with excitement. The mention of the prestigious institute was more than they could have hoped for. It meant permanent federal protection for the sacred caves. Back in the village, as the sun set over the Montana horizon, preparations for the ceremony began. Maxwell watched in amazement as Luna was prepared by the elder women of the tribe, her traditional dress decorated with beads and feathers. "Are you nervous?" asked Swift Horse, approaching with a rare smile. "A little," Maxwell admitted. "I want to do everything right to show proper respect." "You already have," replied the warrior, "with your actions, not just your words. The spirits see that." The ceremony began at dusk, with the valley lit by dozens of bonfires. Maxwell, wearing traditional Lakota clothing, felt the weight of the moment in every beat of the sacred drums. Luna emerged from her tent like a vision not only beautiful, but radiant, with an inner strength that seemed to light up the night. Her eyes met Maxwell's through the dancing flames, and in that moment, all the doubts, all the obstacles they had faced seemed to melt away like snow in the sun. The elders conducted the ritual in Lakota, their voices rising in ancient chants that echoed through the valley. Maxwell and Luna exchanged promises, first in her language, then in his sealing their commitment, not only to each other, but to both worlds that were now united through them. When the ceremony ended with the blessing of the elders and the warm embrace of the community, Maxwell realized that he had found much more than love in the wilds of Montana. He had found a purpose, a family, and a place to call home. "The spirits are happy," whispered Luna in his ear as they danced under the stars. "They know that through us, old wounds are beginning to heal." Maxwell pulled her closer, feeling his heartbeat in tune with the drums. "And through us," he replied softly, "new paths begin to be traced." The night advanced, and with it, the promise of a future where different cultures could not only coexist, but flourish together like the wildflowers that grew on the Montana. Prairies free, strong, and eternally beautiful in their diversity. Fall had arrived in Montana, painting the prairies in shades of gold and crimson. A month had passed since the ceremony that united Maxwell and Luna, and life in the Lakota village was finding a new rhythm. The sacred caves, now under federal protection, became the object of careful study by researchers from the Smithsonian Institute, always accompanied by members of the tribe to ensure respect for the sacred sites. Maxwell watched Luna guide a group of scholars, her voice firm but gentle, as she explained the importance of each symbol, each mark on the ancient walls. She had become a natural bridge between the two worlds, as had he, each bringing their own perspective to this new form of coexistence. "Your wife has a special gift," commented Dr. William Matthews, the Smithsonian's lead researcher. "The way she translates not just the words, but the spirit of her culture is remarkable." Maxwell felt his chest swell with pride. "Luna always says that understanding is the first step to respect." The afternoon was drawing to a close when a horseman rode into the village. It was one of Sheriff Harrison's deputies carrying urgent news. "Cooper," he called, dismounting hastily. "Trouble at Fort Blessing. Black River Mining is trying one last desperate move." Maxwell and Luna met with the deputy in the main tent along with the tribal elders. The news was worrying. The company had sent lawyers from Washington to challenge the federal protection of the land. "They claim that the evidence was obtained under coercion," explained the congressman. "They're trying to invalidate Hawkins's testimony." Luna exchanged a worried glance with Maxwell. "If they succeed, all our work could be lost." "We won't allow it," Maxwell declared, his voice carrying the same determination he had shown during the battle for the caves. "We have more than just Hawkins's testimony. We have the living history of this people." The next few days were filled with intense preparation. Luna worked tirelessly with the elders, documenting every aspect of the cultural and spiritual importance of the caves. Maxwell, for his part, used his army contacts to gather additional evidence about Black River Mining's dubious practices in other territories. One afternoon, while they were organizing documents in their tent, Luna suddenly stopped, putting her hand to her mouth, as if feeling nauseous. "Are you all right?" asked Maxwell, concerned. Luna smiled mysteriously. "Spirits have interesting ways of giving us signs," she replied, gently touching her belly, "especially when a new life begins to form." Maxwell felt the world stop for a moment, processing the meaning of those words. We're going to have a baby," confirmed Luna, her eyes shining with tears of joy. "A child who will carry the blood of two peoples, a living symbol of the union we fought to protect." The news of Luna's pregnancy spread through the village like a warm summer wind, bringing with it a new wave of hope and determination. For the Lakota, it was a powerful sign from the spirits. A new life would be born to carry on the traditions and stories of their people. The hearing at Fort Blessing was scheduled for a week later. The small courtroom was packed on one side, the impeccably dressed lawyers from Black River Mining on the other, Maxwell, Luna, and an impressive delegation of Lakotas in their traditional costumes. "This is more than a land dispute," began Maxwell in his statement. "It's about recognizing and respecting a people's right to preserve their history, their culture, their way of life." Luna then stood up, her presence commanding immediate attention. Dressed with dignity in her traditional clothes, one hand resting gently on her still imperceptibly growing belly, she began to tell the story of her people. "On the walls of those caves," she said, her voice clear and strong, "are written not only the stories of the past, but the prophecies of the future, a future where different peoples learn to walk together in respect and understanding." The federal judge, an elderly man with piercing eyes, listened carefully to all the testimonies. When Black River's lawyers tried to discredit the evidence as primitive superstition, he stopped them abruptly. "The law of this country," he declared, "is designed to protect the rights of all its citizens, and that includes the right to preserve their cultural heritage." The decision was unanimous. The sacred caves would remain under federal protection, and Black River Mining would be fined for its acts of destruction and attempted fraud. That evening, back in the village, a big celebration was organized. Under the Montana stars around the sacred bonfires, Maxwell held Luna in his arms, both lulled by the sound of traditional drums. "Our son will grow up knowing both worlds," said Luna softly. "He will learn the ways of the spirits and the stories of his people, but he will also understand the world beyond these mountains." Maxwell kissed her forehead gently. "You will grow up knowing that love can build bridges over the greatest chasms, that courage lies not only in fighting, but in choosing peace." Swift Horse approached them, his normally stern face softened by a smile. "The elders have had a vision," he announced. "Your son will be a guardian not just of the sacred caves, but of the history you two helped write." The warrior's words resonated deeply with Maxwell and Luna. Looking around at the community gathered in celebration at the ancient mountains that held their secrets at the starry sky that had witnessed their entire journey, they felt the weight and beauty of the legacy they were building. A legacy not just of blood or tradition, but of love, courage, and hope. A legacy that proved that even the most unlikely stories could come true when hearts opened up to new possibilities. The stars continued their eternal dance over Montana, while below two hearts beat as one, and inside Luna a new life grew a living. Promise of a future where different worlds could not only coexist, but flourish together in harmony. Spring had returned to Montana, bringing with it the rebirth of nature and new hope. 6 months had passed since the victory over Black River mining, and the changes in the Lakota village were visible everywhere. The sacred caves, partially restored, now served as a meeting point between two cultures, with scholars and visitors learning about ancestral traditions under the careful guidance of the elders. Luna, her belly now visibly rounded by 7 months of pregnancy, walked among the beds of medicinal herbs she had expanded near her tent. Maxwell watched his wife with admiration, amazed at how she managed to balance her responsibilities as a healer-teacher of ancient traditions and Mother Tobe. "The Smithsonian researchers are leaving tomorrow," commented Luna, taking a seat next to him. "Dr. Matthews said he's never seen such complete documentation of native rituals." Maxwell smiled, covering her hand with his. "That's because they've never before allowed the natives themselves to tell their story. You've changed that, Luna." A movement at the entrance to the village caught her eye. Swift Horse was approaching quickly, his normally stoic face marked by an expression of urgency. "Riders are approaching," he announced. "But it's not trouble this time. It's Sheriff Harrison, and he brings important news." The sheriff arrived a few minutes later, removing his hat in respect, as he entered the main tent, where the elders were meeting. Maxwell and Luna joined the council, curious about the reason for the unexpected visit. "I received a telegram from Washington." Harrison began, pulling a folded piece of paper from his pocket. "Congress passed a special protection law for sacred native territories, using the Lakota caves as a model. You have not only saved their land, but helped set a precedent that will protect other native peoples." The news was greeted with expressions of joy and gratitude from the spirits. Luna squeezed Maxwell's hand, tears of happiness shining in her eyes. "There's more," Harrison continued, a rare smile on his wrinkled face. "The government is establishing a special council to oversee the preservation of sacred sites, and they want native representatives. Luna, they specifically requested your participation." Maxwell felt his heart swell with pride. His wife, who had once hidden in caves to survive, was now being recognized as an important voice for her people. The celebration that followed was marked by traditional dances and ancient stories told around the campfires. Maxwell watched Luna talk to the elders, her presence radiant in the firelight. At moments like this, he could hardly believe the journey that had brought them there. "The spirits have curious ways of weaving our destinies," said a voice behind him. It was White Feather, the tribe's most respected elder. "When Luna brought you wounded and unconscious, many feared that your presence would bring more pain to our people. Now we see that the spirits were wiser than us." "Sometimes I wonder," Maxwell replied softly, "if the bear wasn't sent by the spirits to bring me here to her." The old woman smiled mysteriously. "The bear is a powerful messenger. He tests our strength, but he also guides us to our true path. Your son will carry the strength of the bear and the wisdom of two peoples." As if responding to the elder woman's words, Luna suddenly brought her hands to her belly, her eyes widening. Maxwell rushed over to her, worry on his face. "The baby," whispered Luna, a smile lighting up her face. "He's dancing to the drums." The following weeks brought a series of changes to the village. With the new protected status, more resources arrived to help preserve the caves and Lakota traditions. Maxwell coordinated the construction of a school where both native and white children could learn together, respecting both cultures. It was on a quiet afternoon while Luna was teaching a group of young people about the healing properties of plants that the first signs of labor began. The older women of the tribe immediately took charge, guiding her to the healing tent while chanting ancient songs of protection. Maxwell waited anxiously outside, the hours dragging by like an eternity. The sun had completed its journey across the sky, and the first stars were just beginning to appear when a baby's loud cry cut through the night air. White Feather emerged from the tent, her wrinkled face softened by a smile. "Come," she called. "Meet your son." Inside the tent, illuminated by the soft glow of candles, Luna lay on a soft fur bed, holding a small bundle. Her face, although tired, radiated a deep happiness. "Our son," she said softly, when Maxwell knelt beside her. "Strong as the bear that brought us together, free as the wind that blows across the prairies." The baby was perfect, his skin a golden hue that blended his parents' heritage, his eyes, when he opened them briefly, dark and deep like his mother's. "What will your name be?" she said softly when Maxwell knelt down beside her. "What will its name be?" asked Maxwell gently, touching the little hand that had closed with surprising strength around his finger. Luna smiled, exchanging a meaningful glance with White Feather. "In the tradition of my people, he will be called Dancing Bear, for he danced in my womb to the sound of the sacred drums. And in your tradition—" "Benjamin," Maxwell added, remembering the conversations they'd had about names. "Benjamin Cooper." "A name for each of his paths," approved White Feather. "That way he'll always know who he is and where he came from." That night, as the full moon bathed the Montana prairies in its silvery light, Maxwell sat next to his family, his heart overflowing with gratitude. Little Dancing Bear slept peacefully in Luna's arms, oblivious to the profound meaning of his birth, a living symbol of the union between two worlds that once seemed irreconcilable. "Look," whispered Luna, pointing to the entrance of the tent. A majestic brown bear was standing in the distance, its silhouette clear against the starry sky. For a moment the animal seemed to look directly at them before disappearing silently into the night. "The spirits bless us," said Luna softly. "Our son will grow up knowing both the strength of ancient traditions and the promise of a new dawn." Maxwell hugged his family, feeling the deep truth in those words. There in the wilds of Montana, among the ancient mountains, and under the infinite sky, two hearts had found not only love, but a purpose greater than themselves. And through their son, this story of hope and unity would continue to be told, echoing through the generations like the distant sound of sacred drums on starry Montana nights.